Trucker Dump, episode 123, Advice for New Truckers.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com, resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Hey, folks, Todd McCann here, coming to you from Arcadia, Wisconsin this time. Man, it is beautiful weather outside, 55 degrees. It's perfect podcasting weather. Don't have to leave the truck running because it's not too hot outside, but it's also not so cold that my nipples feel like they're going to shatter. So that's a good thing, right? I want to give you a quick rundown of the show before I get into all my various excuses as to why the podcast hasn't been out since July 3rd. Anyway, we're going to hit up on the GAT show, the Great American Trucking Show that I went to for the first time this year. Going to introduce you to a new trucking podcast. Going to talk a couple of stories about some moron drivers who, well, they're morons. And a couple of different stories on mandatory speed limiters. We're also going to have a quick story on platooning. If you haven't heard what that is, I'll briefly explain what that is. You probably have, though. And we're going to end up with the story section with a funny story about a guy who was trying to steal some cargo off a truck. Got what was coming to him, I can tell you that. In the feedback section, we're going to hear from somebody. Well, they were anonymous. The email came from the letterhead of Bluegrass Cellular. So whoever that is, well, you're going to get your email read today. We also heard from someone calling themselves Fullofit, which is a great name. Love that. And we're going to hear from Renae again. She did not send an audio comment like she promised to, but she hopefully she'll do that in the future. But we got one of her. Okay, let's get back into July 3rd. Okay, first, I want to apologize. It's been since July 3rd, like I said. I was supposed to put one out in mid-August. I had total plans to do it, and things kept happening, and I just didn't get it done. So first, I want to apologize to Express Truck Tax, who wrote a blog post on the heavy vehicle use tax. They actually did an audio clip for it too, so I could include that in this podcast, and I didn't get it out in time. I did apologize to them profusely, and they just said to run it next year because it is based on a August deadline thing, which is why I really needed to have this podcast out. But I just couldn't get it done, you know. First off, I've been having some truck issues. Yes, this Kenworth that I don't know how you can love a truck so much and hate it at the same time, but I've had lots of little bitty niggling problems with this thing. First, I had some battery issues. Well, I had, when I had my nephew Jake out with me this past time, I think I told you in the last episode that we actually had my APU in this thing broke down. That's an auxiliary power unit for all you non-truckers. It broke down and had to get a software reboot, spent a day in a Kenworth shop. Well, I think my nephews are jinxes because when Joel came out with me, it happened again. And it was the exact same issue. And I had to go back in and thankfully got it fixed at our shop this time, but it still took a whole day to fix it. So that's pretty freaking annoying. Then my truck had some battery issues. And that was my own fault. I blame myself for this. I had just a niggling problem where like the inverter would just cut out on me at random times. So I'd be, playing on my computer or whatever, doing whatever I'm doing on my computer, and I notice the battery's low, and I look up, even though it's plugged in, and I look up and all the power's off in the truck, and I'm like, well, what happened, and the inverter just cut out. So I assumed it was an inverter problem, and I asked them to check it when I went into a yard. I know better than this. You don't do that because they're always going to find something wrong with it, and then you're going to be down. Well, the same thing happened this time. They found a bunch of bad batteries was actually the problem, and they sent me to a hotel, and it was not a very good hotel. Normally, now I know you're thinking, hey, with all this downtime, you should be podcasting. Well, okay, you're not going to podcast when you're sitting around in a Kenworth shop. And even when I got the hotel, it was a weird hotel as is. It was downtown, well, not downtown Memphis, but off the, what is it, the 240 loop? Yeah, I think it's the 240 loop there. And it was Elvis decorations everywhere, because Graceland's near there. And the Wi-Fi, it just sucked. It was a pretty bad neighborhood. And just the Wi-Fi just sucked. It was absolutely worthless. So I just watched some movies that I had because, when your truck's broke down, the last thing you are is in a good enough mood to podcast. So, and with these nephews, I had Jared and Joel 2 years ago, and this year I had Joel and Jacob. And I think, thankfully, they're done. I mean, it's nice having them. It's a nice change of pace, but it does screw up everything that I'm used to doing, my whole routine out here. And just impossible to do a podcast with them out here. They take all of my time pretty much. I did like having them, but I think they're pretty much done. Jared gave up after the first year. He was done. He said he's never coming back. Joel came out last year and this year, but he didn't have as much fun this year, I could tell. And I think he says he might come out next year, but I don't think he's going to. He's the youngest one, by the way. Now, Jake, it was his first year out here, and he had a lot of fun, which shocks me because I figured I would have a lot of problems with him. He's got such a short attention span. I figured he'd be bored out of his mind, but never once in 3 weeks did he say he was bored. I was floored. But anyway, we had some fun, and I honestly can't remember if I talked about him. Yeah, I did talk about him coming out here, but then Joel came out again this past year, and like I said, I don't think he's coming back. Jake said he's coming back next year. I'm not sure about that because he will be graduating next year, and I think he's going to find other things to do with his summer, which is fine. At least I'll be able to podcast on a regular basis. Well, as regular as I get anyway. So anyway, those are basically my excuses for not having a podcast out since July 3rd. But hey, we're back. So hey, let me talk about the GATS show a little bit. That's the Great American Trucking Show that was held in Dallas. I think it's held in Dallas every year. But it was my first time going. And I didn't realize this when I went to the website to check it out, but you actually need to register for this thing before you go. You can buy tickets when you're there, but they're like $10. And if you register ahead of time, there is no fee. So naturally, since I'm a giant cheapskate, I registered. But then I got to looking on the website and I thought, you know what? They're offering press credentials. I wonder if the Trucker Dump, I've been doing this since 2009. I wonder if I would be eligible for that. So I thought, what the heck, And I was wanting to, find some guests for the podcast and stuff like that. And I thought, hey, if I am a media, if I'm listed as press, maybe they'll take me a little bit more seriously. And so I applied for it, and lo and behold, a couple days later, they issued me a press pass. So pretty cool. I was pretty happy about that. I think it did open some doors when I'd go up and I'd say, hey, I'm Todd from the Trucker Dump podcast, and I'd show them my badge and, made me look all cool. Although I'm not sure I was dressed like the rest of the press there. I was wearing a Save Ferris shirt. You 80s movies people will get that reference. But anyway, actually one of the ladies who printed out the thing said, no, you're not really dressed like the rest of the press. But whatever, I'm a blogger. I'm not some fancy pants news guy. Anyway, it was a fun show. I guess I don't really know. I have no frame of reference. So there was lots of trucks there, which I don't have a lot of interest in that. So that didn't really do anything for me. I was there to talk to people and, try to introduce myself and find some cool products to talk about and some cool people to talk to on the website or on the podcast. I think I found some of those, and I was also there working on another project, but I'll have to talk about that at a later date if anything comes from that. I think I got good news from all of that stuff, and hopefully we'll have some good interviews for you in the future. I made it there on Saturday, which was the very last day. I met some cool people there. I met Jewel Jones from Twitter and everywhere. When you see her, you can't miss her, and man, she is a spitfire. When she met me, when I met her, man, she's just balls to the wall. I mean, she's serious about what she does, but she seemed like a lot of fun. Anyway, I ran into a couple of YouTubers there. Of course, I don't know any of these people, but I found out, I can't even remember the one guy's name, but I met one guy on the way back, and he goes by Buck Wild on YouTube, and I was checking out some of his videos. Basically what he does is he started trucking a few years back, and he's just been kind of chronicling it as he goes along. You know, from the very beginning, he just does these YouTube channels where he just kind of tells you what he's doing and what he's experiencing, and, you know, some videos from the road and stuff like that. So if you're interested in that, check out Buck Wild on YouTube, and that's Bukwild, and he was a super nice guy. He was there with his lady, and we talked all the way back. I handed him one of my business cards, and he was like, "Hey man, I need to get one of these business cards made up." I did have some business cards made up. Pretty happy with it. Anyway, what else happened? Well, when we got back from the shuttle bus, you can park. They rent out a parking space down there for truckers, which is kind of cool. It's a little community, you know. It's got a big tent, and they have live music out there, and food, and different kind of displays out there and stuff like that. But they had something kind of cool this year. They had a Jane Denham, which I had never heard before, honestly. But she is an Australian country artist, and she really focuses on trucker stuff. She actually has a hit called Addicted to the Diesel. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. And it went to #1 on the Australian charts, which is pretty cool because I don't think any trucking song since the 70s would be on the top of the charts here in the States. I was looking up her stuff on YouTube, and it's a pretty cool video. It's a pretty cool song, actually, and I'm not a huge country fan. So I also found another one. She did another one live there called Stacks, and it's a really cool song, too. It's a fairly new release, but both of them are pretty cool songs for country. And she was just kind of cool, and it was cool of her to come all the way from Australia for that. I just sat around with some other drivers that I met there, just talked to them a little bit. It was kind of neat to actually talk to drivers. I don't do that probably as much as I should. There were some cool guys there, though. Had a good time with them, sat around. They were drinking some beer, but they weren't actually selling beer in the parking lot, so I just had a Dr. Pepper, because that's how I roll. Anyway, met a lot of cool advertisers there, and exhibitors there. I didn't make it near as much as I wanted to all over that show. I only got there, I got there basically at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and it closed at 4, so I spent 6 hours there. I didn't even get half the floor completely covered, and I missed some stuff that I really wanted to see and some people that I wanted to talk to, but what are you going to do? Now I know. And some of the other guys that I talked to there said that if I go to Matt's this year, which is out in, that's the Mid-American Trucking Show, I think. That's out in Louisville. And they said if you go to that, make sure you give all 3 days, because you're going to need it to cover it, because it's a lot bigger. Oh, boy. I'm not even sure if I'm going to make it to that one. You know, one other thing came from the trucking show, though, and that is I might have met a future employer, but we have to stay tuned to that. And, of course, I won't tell you who it is, because that's how I roll. All right. One cool person I did meet there, though, was a girl named Rachel, and she was from @truckjobs.com, and she was doing some little interviews, you know, with just people walking by, and I told her I'd been talking to the guys from Big Rig Banter, which is the podcast I was talking about. Now, okay, Big Rig Banter is sponsored by alltruckjobs.com, which is one of those sites where you enter your application there and they will submit it to multiple carriers. But Big Rig Banter is a new podcast. It's two guys that are not truckers. Now, okay, first, I know you're probably thinking, well, why do I want to listen to them for? You know, they ain't truckers. Well, I got to say, they are putting a lot of effort into this podcast, and it's coming off pretty well. There's been some things that weren't quite right, and I'm I'm actually supposed to talk to them on the phone tomorrow because they want to pick my brain about podcasting and stuff and about some trucking stuff, which is good. To me, it shows that they have an interest in learning about the trucking side of it. They're not just on here trying to promote their website. I've actually learned some stuff about trucking from two guys who aren't truckers, from listening to the podcast. So that's kind of cool. So you might want to check that out. That's Big Rig Banter, and that's the podcast. Just look for that on iTunes or wherever you find it. There's probably a link on alltruckjobs.com also. But the whole reason I met these guys is because Troy sent me, Troy's one of the hosts, Connor is the other one. Troy actually sent me a video, and they put up on alltruckjobs.com, and I had a laugh about it. It's Exercises for Truckers with Troy Thunder. It's what he calls himself, and it's set in like an 80s type thing, and it's just pretty darn funny, actually. It's just goofy, and it was just fun to watch. There's a link in the show notes to it. I also put that video on my blog, just as kind of like a standalone thing. So check that out when you get a chance. Oh, and by the way, the latest Big Rig Banter, I'm not sure what episode that is, but my interview with Rachel will be on there. So I'm interested to hear how that came out. I probably sound like a total dork, but what's to be expected? All right, let's get to those stories with these couple of morons. Okay. All right, tell me something. How exactly do truckers get out of truck driving school without knowing how much a ton is? Seriously. Okay, I found this article first on, let's see, what was it? Truckers Report, which is where I find most of my stuff. But there's a story on here about a 23-year-old woman who went across a 6-ton bridge in a semi. And I guess she missed her turn. She was in Indiana, and she missed her turn. And she's from that area, and she knew a different way around, so she just went on this other way. The little did she think about, I guess, is there's like one of those old steel bridges that literally has a 6-ton weight limit, and she tried to go across it and broke the whole freaking thing down. Afterwards, they interviewed her, and she said she admitted she had no idea how much 6 tons was. How can you drive a truck and not know how much 6 tons is? It is amazing. But apparently she's not alone. There was a 29-year-old guy who over in Iowa ran his 30-ton truck across a 3-ton bridge. The speculation is that he might have been following a GPS. But man, when you look at these pictures, there's a link to both of these articles in the show notes. You got to check out this picture of this 30-ton truck going across this 3-ton bridge. It actually made it almost all the way across before it collapsed, and just the rear end of the trailer is hanging out over the river. Unfreaking believable. I just don't know. It just says a lot about our industry in general and the training aspect of it as to how these people are getting out of school without knowing what a ton is. And getting trained to just follow GPS only. I mean, come on. You got to use your freaking brain here, people. Anyway. All right. Next story. We got some mandatory speed limiters. That was scrapped. Man, you know how happy I was about that. That just makes me all fuzzy inside. Although I honestly don't know why it matters to me, because I always drive a speed limited truck and I'm just fine with it. But, I didn't want everybody to be speed limited. That's bad enough. As you guys know, those of you who've been following the podcast for a while, one of my pet peeves is that whole turtle racing thing. And that was going to get really out of hand with speed limiters. But thankfully, they have scrapped that, at least for now anyway. Let's hope that sticks. Because man, oh man, we don't want any part of that. It's funny that the ATA, the American Trucking Association, was one of the ones who was really pushing that in the long run. But once they even started looking at the data and what was actually going to happen and the impacts of the rule, even they spoke out against it. So thank you. They've actually come to their senses on that. But, you know, as always, you can't expect this thing not to return it some day later. I just hope that because the American Trucking Association, who was so behind it, is now against it, maybe it won't come back. Now, I'd like to think we can thank the good folks over at OIDA for this, for fighting this so hard. That's the Owner-Operators Independent Drivers Association. Did I get that right? Good God, I should. They did a lot of stuff against this speed limiter stuff, and so hopefully they had something to do with it. I did see an excellent video that they put out. That was basically explaining how speed limiters were going to affect traffic, and it was a really cool video. I'll put a link in the show notes, and you can check that out. Okay, let's move on to this platooning story. I found this over on, what is it, Fleet Owner? Yeah, fleetowner.com. Okay, if you don't know what platooning is, I was not really familiar with it either, but basically it is a series of trucks. It can be one, it can be 2 trucks or 3 or 4. They can add as many as they want. Right now they're just doing two truck platooning. And basically what it is it's 2 trucks that are talking via radio, like a special radio, so they can read what the front truck is doing. Like as soon as it needs to apply the brakes, the back truck is going to do the exact same thing. Now what this does is it enables the front vehicle to get a 4.5% fuel savings and the back vehicle 10% fuel savings. The thing is, though, these suckers have to be between 30 and 50 feet apart. Now, okay, I understand the whole drafting thing, you know. I'm not a NASCAR guy, but I do understand drafting. And that's all fine and dandy if you're the front guy. But I do not want to be the back guy, being 30 to 50 feet from somebody else's bumper. I realize now that these electronics and stuff probably have faster reflexes than I do, and that's why this thing works. But I don't want to be staring at the back of somebody else's trailer all day long from 30 feet and constantly be like in a state of panic, like at any second they could hit the brakes, and then I'm going to be paranoid that the electronics isn't going to do it like they are supposed to. So I'm a little bit paranoid about this, and I certainly wouldn't want to be the trailing truck, but this is already going on, and there's some states who have already said that it's happening, and they've already got it implemented. So just be prepared if you see 2 trucks that are really close together. That's what they're doing. They're not just tailgating, so I guess I can't complain about, you know, tailgating trucks anymore. Man, I just don't know what to think about this. And for the record, this is not self-driving trucks. Like I stated, this has to have a driver in each seat. So it's not like we're losing our jobs or anything, but this is the first step of many, I'm sure, to get towards that. Ugh. So hey, since that story is such a bummer, let's end on a lighter note. Once again, I saw this on the truckersreport.com. This is called Ice Cold Justice was the name of the article. Okay, this is awesome. Okay, a truck driver in Indiana stopped one night, and about 4 a.m, he heard someone walking around in his trailer. He walked around to the back, somebody was inside, and he shut the door. Here's the deal. It was a reefer, and it was set at minus 10 degrees. I think that is so awesome. They said by the time the cops got there that the guy was pounding on the door just trying to get out, and he didn't even care that he was getting arrested, which I think is just great. You know, talk about sweet justice. You know, that jerk had it coming. Oh, if there could just be that justice every time a soccer mom pulls in front of me and cuts across 3 lanes to get to an exit ramp. Oh well. Okay, next I want to mention a video I did. I've been wanting to branch out into YouTube a bit more, and I just didn't really know what to do. And I had an opportunity when I had a rant about an anal customer, basically, who it was a food grade material, and they were very picky about the trailer, and I put out about a 7-minute video on it, which is basically one giant rant, but feel free to check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes. Or you can go to YouTube/about truck driving. That's where all my videos are there. And I'm going to try, like I say, I'm going to try to start doing some more every now and then if I can figure out how to do it right and good. I just don't want to, half-ass do it. Ooh, I said ass. I'm wrong. I'm going to hell. That's a joke, people. That's a joke. I don't think you're cussing. If you cuss, you're going to hell. Man, I should just delete all this part. But I'm not going to. All right. Oh, one last thing. The jacket. We were talking about the Meritor Run with the Bulls jacket. There's a drawing for that. I think I've got maybe only 3 or 4 entries is all. So one of you guys has got a really good chance of winning it. Make sure you get it in. I did say I was going to hold off on this until I got a decent amount of entries, and I don't think 3 or 4 is that. But hey, if by the time this next podcast rolls around and nobody else is entered, then we're probably just going to do the drawing, and it just evens the odds. So, hey, if you want to win a free jacket, check out. I'll put a link in the show notes to it. You can see a picture of it. And got a good chance of winning. Let's get on it. Okay, now I got some splaining to do. First off, I'm in Council Bluffs, Iowa. I had to move locations. Didn't have time to finish up the other night. And actually, the reason why is because I'm trying to do this in video. Okay, now let me explain this here. I explained in the beginning that this was going to be a podcast within a podcast. All right, I'm going to market this podcast at trucking schools, and I didn't want to include all of the intro and the feedback and all that stuff, so I'm just making it nice and compact where hopefully they'll play it in the trucking school. And also, something different, I'm trying to do it video because I figured there would be a better chance of getting them to play video than audio. Of course, not just a camera pointed at my head the whole time, but I plan on, doing some footage and getting some clips of some of the things I'm talking about in there and cut that into the talking head part. But anyway, like I said, I want to market this at truck driving schools because the way I figure it, truck driving schools have their hands full with teaching you the legal stuff, the mechanical stuff, the inspection stuff, how to shift, all that good stuff. But they can't really teach you what trucking's like, and they can't really give you lessons that will help you through your career. And that's what the goal of this podcast is. It's stuff that they're going to learn over time, but it would be much better for them and, quite frankly, all of us if it is just learned immediately and they don't have to worry, we don't have to worry about dealing with rookie mistakes as much out here. So that's the premise of this thing. Like I said, marketing at trucking schools. And I figure along the way, if they actually enjoy the podcast, they might subscribe when they get out. So there's kind of a dual purpose there, helping them, helping me. Anyway, the problem is I was trying to do video and I've been trying to do it all day long and I just don't have the right equipment. I can't get the lighting right. My iPhone is fine for recording it, but I just can't get the lighting right, and it was just a mess. And I just couldn't. I don't have a stable platform in here. I don't have a good table, so the angle was all off. Everything's all screwed up. So I've given up. Basically, I've decided I need to get this podcast out. It's been too long anyway. I'm going to just go ahead and record this now like I normally do in audio form. Later on, I'll go back and I'll try to make this into a video that I can send off to the trucking schools. But for now, you're just getting regular old boring audio. And I will let you know when the video comes out, if it ever does, because that requires me to buy some more stuff for video, and I'm a cheapskate, so you know how that goes. All right, let's get on with this. I call this Advice for New Truckers. And here comes the music again.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com. Resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Hey there, folks. Todd McCann here. I record this podcast inside the cab of my truck, so if you hear air brakes or a reefer unit or an APU firing up, well, that's just the way things roll here. So anyway, today's podcast is dedicated to you new truckers out there. Perhaps you've been driving for a few months already, or maybe you're sitting at a desk at a truck driving school right now. If that's the case, then... Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure you were awake in case you just got done watching one of those action-packed hazmat safety videos. If you've seen it already, then you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, be sure to stock up on some Kleenex before it starts. You're going to need them to wipe up the drool off your table when it's over. Now, this advice I'm about to give you is not the stuff your instructor is teaching you right now. These are all things I wish I would have known when I started out. Lessons you will undoubtedly learn over time. The problem is, you're just going to make yours and everyone else's lives miserable until you learn it. And honestly, since I'm going to be sharing a road with you soon, I'm thinking you can save me some hair pulling by you having an open mind for a few minutes. Besides, the transmission in your training truck could probably use a break from all that incessant grinding anyway. Don't deny it, I heard it 2 states away. So let's get started. But since I'm getting ready to impart some old dude trucker wisdom on you, perhaps I should tell you where I'm coming from first. That way you don't think I've only been driving for 6 months, or that I'm some pencil-pushing desk jockey blowhard. Man, that was a mouthful. So like I said, my name's Todd McCann, and I was sitting in a driving school just like you are now in the summer of 1997. I've been a company driver the entire time, meaning I have never, nor have I ever desired to, own my own truck. My wife of over 20 years, whom my listeners fondly know as the Evil Overlord, was my co-driver for 9 of those years, but I've been doing the solo thing ever since. For the record, not only does she know I call her the Evil Overlord, but she highly approves. Largely because she knows it's frickin' true. If you need proof of that, just check out Trucker Dump episode number 100, What Makes the Evil Overlord Evil. But you know, I'm also the author of 2 ebooks. The first is How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job, and the second is Trucking Life, an entertaining yet informative guide to becoming and being a truck driver, which I'm well aware probably sets a new Guinness World's Record for longest tagline used in the title of a book. I've also been blogging and podcasting since 2009. First off, let me just say thank you for entering the trucking industry. The job can be as frustrating as getting behind an old lady in the Walmart checkout line who's writing a check for $7 worth of cat food, but it can also be as rewarding as the feeling you get when you punch that old lady in the face. Okay, seriously, punching old ladies isn't cool. An old man, however, well, that's fair game. What? So take a look around you right now and think about this. Every product in this room has likely been hauled on a truck at one point or another. It's an important job that largely goes unthanked. So let me be among the first to thank you for becoming a key part in America's economy. Now don't you feel proud? Tell you what, after class today, head to your nearest Dairy Queen and treat yourself to a banana split blizzard. Which, I might add, is only made possible by a trucker who delivered fresh fruit and delicious ice cream. And by the way, that whole turning it upside down thing they do with the blizzard is complete magic. We truckers have nothing to do with that. Although I can't count how many times I wish I could Expelliarmus the steering wheel out of some annoying soccer mom's hands. Anywho, let me first address a few concerns I know I had as a rookie trucker. First, quit sweating the road test at your first company. Trust me here, any trucking company that's willing to hire you straight out of school doesn't expect you to be perfect. In fact, they'd be outright shocked if you didn't hunt for and grind a few gears, and you'll have to pick their jaw up off the floor if you nail the backing test with only one pull-up. And hey, if it makes you feel any better, I've been driving over 20 years and I still grind a few gears here and there, and I often have to pull up more than once to back straight into a dock. But you know what? Let's keep that between us. My company thinks I'm perfect. Psst. Here's another thing you're probably concerned about right now. The training process at your first company. Okay, first off, I want to say, during training, stand up for yourself. No matter how confident of a person you normally are, that all seems to go out the window when you get in the truck with your trainer at your first company. I know from my own personal experience that I felt like I was going to let down my trainer if I didn't do exactly as he said. I also felt I had no input in how things were done. I was wrong. Again, this can lead to even the most confident person to humble themselves and get walked all over. For example, I talked to one young guy who had recently finished training. He said his trainer would tell him to pull over on an exit ramp where he'd proceed to go into the bunk area and make himself a sandwich or a bowl of soup or something. Never once did the trainer offer him any space in his cooler or suggest where there might be a truck stop with food nearby. Basically, this rookie would go an entire day without eating, all because he thought he'd look weak for speaking up. Man, that's uncool. In another case, a female driver told me that her trainer only allowed her to take one shower during her 3-week training period. Ew. I asked her why she tolerated that. She said she just thought that's how it was done and she didn't want to disappoint him. Now, I should point out that things like this won't happen all the time with every trainer. My trainer was awesome, while the evil overlord nicknamed her trainer She-Double. So you can imagine how well that went. For full details on that story, check out the training chapter of Trucking Life. It's really all luck of the draw who you get, though. There's just no getting around it. Being stuck in a truck with a complete stranger for a few weeks sucks harder than a kid with a milkshake and one of those crazy straws. Just remember, it's only a few weeks. The next advice I have for training is avoid being used as a money-making machine. There's one thing that happens in training way more often than it should. Trainers often get paid by the mile for all miles run, so quite often they'll use their trainee as a team driver instead of teaching them how to drive, which, of course, they are supposed to be doing. Again, the trainee feels like they're not getting trained properly, yet they're afraid to say anything to the trainer or the company about it. Now, I should point out that this is standard practice to eventually work into a team operation during the training process. The problem is when you start out that way. In the beginning, your trainer should be in the front seat next to you, talking you through rough situations and just generally being a second pair of eyes. As each day goes by, you should be driving a bit more until eventually you're driving while your trainer is sleeping and vice versa. It's really a good way to build up your driving stamina. Now a word to the ladies here. If there's no ladies in the classroom, well, I'm sorry. You're just going to have to sit through it. But here's something to be aware of. There have been documented cases where male trainers have convinced female trainers that they're not going to give them a passing grade unless they sleep with them. And it has worked. Yep, I know that sounds totally bizarre in this day and age of lady power and all, but there was a highly publicized story about this atrocity a few years back when this was happening regularly at a particular trucking company. Someone eventually had the chutzpah to report them, thank God. Once again, there's just something about the intimacy of sharing truck space with someone that leads trainees to accept conditions that they shouldn't. And here's what you do. Address the issues. Overcome your fears of looking weak and stand up for yourself. As my 8-year-old nephew once boldly proclaimed as he smacked his tiny little chest, "I'm a man, baby." Listen, the company's not going to fire you for requesting the things you need. If you're hungry, ask your trainer where you can stop to eat. You may not get a shower every day, welcome to trucking, but there have honestly only been a handful of times in my 20-plus year career that I haven't been able to manage to shower at least every other day. Basically, if you have any problem with the way you're being trained, tell your trainer. If you want him to sit in front to help you more, tell him. And for Pete's sake, ladies, if your male trainer barrages you with sexual innuendo, outright flirting, or worse, tell him you don't appreciate it and not to do it again. If any problems persist, call your company's training department and tell them what's going on. If they don't do anything about it, call your recruiter back and tell them to put you in touch with someone who will. Either that or quit and find a new job. Yes, I'm serious about that. If they don't respond to your concerns, you don't want to work for these sphincter holes anyway. Alright, let's move on from training. First off, get some exercise. The trucking lifestyle is not a healthy one. You're sitting on your keister most of the day and are often working wonky schedules that don't allow a lot of time for exercising. Not to mention that after 11 hours of driving, the last thing you're thinking is, what strenuous activity can I do that'll lift my heart rate and wear me out? Now, I don't know about you, but my thoughts in that situation lean more towards wanting to curl up next to a chicken fried steak and passing out with some of that yummy dried gravy still stuck to my cheek. Just do yourself a favor, and instead of squeezing into those skinny jeans that clearly don't fit, try squeezing in a few minutes of exercise at least 3 times a week. I don't always manage that either, but at least I have the consciousness to feel guilty about it when I fail. And make sure you do this from the very beginning, or else you're never going to get started. Now let's get down to food and money. Speaking of chicken fried steak, your eating habits are the other half of this health issue. My advice to you is to stock up on food at a grocery store and eat in your truck as much as possible. This will help in 2 ways. First, you can eat healthier, and second, you can save a lot of money. In my ever so humble, but always correct, opinion, one of the best things you can do in your career is buy an ice chest, a thermocooler, or if you can afford one, a refrigerator freezer unit for your truck. Sure, you can find healthy options at most any restaurant, but let's be honest, the unhealthy options almost always look more appealing than a chicken breast or a salad. Why tempt yourself? Go to the grocery store, stock up on healthier options, and stay out of the restaurants. The other aspect I mentioned is that doing this will save you a lot of money, which should make you and the rest of your family happy. Lots of truckers eat at restaurants for every meal. With the average meal, including tip, being around $12 to $15, these drivers are spending up to $300 a week on food. I simply don't know how these truckers do that and still have any money left to send home. Maybe that's why the divorce rate is so high among truckers. Now let's compare that to eating in the truck. For breakfast, I typically have instant oatmeal or a frozen burrito. Well, it's not frozen after I microwave it, obviously. Lunch might consist of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and some Cheetos, and dinner involves a can of soup or a frozen dinner. Total cost? Probably around $10 a day. That's less than a third of the cost of eating in restaurants. Sure, you might spend a bit less if you eat fast food instead of sit-down restaurants for every meal, but I'm always shocked at how easy it is to drop $9 or $10 at Arby's. Wait, what's that? Oh, yeah, I can hear you thinking, wait just a cotton-picking minute there. Since when are Cheetos healthy? That's my best trucker voice. You know what? You're right. Cheetos aren't healthy, but at least I can control my portion size this way. If I order a big meal in a restaurant, I know I'm going to eat it all and possibly lick the plate clean, mostly because I'm the world's biggest cheapskate and I'm bound and determined to enjoy every last calorie of the money I just spent. One more thing about food. Road munchies. Do not, I repeat, do not keep unhealthy foods in your truck. And if you do, definitely don't keep them in reach of the driver's seat. I keep fresh fruit, raisins, yogurt, or cheese sticks at hand for the road munchies. Listen, I admit it. I'm weaker than Popeye the Sailor Man before he eats his spinach. If I look over in the passenger seat and see an apple and my beloved bag of Cheetos, I'm going to have those yummy, cheesy, suckable fingertips every time. Okay, here's a bit of advice that you really need to take to heart. Don't get in a hurry. Listen, in trucking, few good things ever come from getting in a rush. Here's some common situations where you're going to be tempted to hurry. Don't. First, you want to chill out when you're getting loaded or unloaded. One of the biggest mistakes I see that even veteran truckers make is getting impatient at customers. When I first started, I'd constantly be worrying if I wasn't getting loaded or unloaded properly. Sometimes I'd even get pissy with the customer. I can tell you from personal experience, that never works out the way you think it will. I still see this happen all the time. A driver comes in screaming and cussing at a receiving clerk because they're taking too long. Quite frankly, the trucker may be right, but it only seems to make the customer move slower. I've been in multiple situations when they bump me up in line and I've gotten finished quicker than Mr. Impatient, all because I have a calm, friendly attitude while they've got steam coming out of their ears like Yosemite Sam when he's hopping mad at bugs. It took me far too many years, but I've learned to stay calm in these situations. There's simply nothing you can do to speed up the process. You can ask what the issue is, but you need to do it in a non-threatening way. You know, just a few days before I recorded this episode, I went into a shipper late because I had been held up in construction traffic. When I walked in, he was printing up a flyer he was planning to leave on the door telling me I had arrived too late and I'd have to wait until the next morning to be loaded. A hot head would have raved about why it wasn't his fault and that the shipping clerk was screwing him. Instead, I chuckled and said, "Well, that sucks. I still got 6 hours of driving available, but hey, it is what it is. I know you don't make the rules. I stuck around and chatted about the bad construction, which he drove through every day to get to work, and we had a few laughs. By the time I was backing into the dock, a loader stuck his head out and said they were going to stay late and load me. Now, you think that would have happened if I'd copped an attitude? Heck, I got a better chance of waking up with a nipple growing out of my forehead. Now, I might add that this is good for any situation where you find yourself waiting. Whether you just found out there's a 3-hour wait to fix a flat tire, your company can't find a load for you, or you're standing in a long line at the fuel desk, just take a chill pill. Getting impatient won't help your situation. It's only going to raise your blood pressure and your overall hatred of the human race. Alright, next up, don't be pressured into driving in bad weather. Never, I repeat, never let someone convince you to drive in bad weather if you aren't comfortable doing so. Let me say this again. Never. You have to be the judge. In the beginning, you'll start freaking out as soon as you see the first few snowflakes. But over time, you'll continue to learn more and more about what you and your truck are capable of. Your dispatcher isn't driving your truck, are they? Yes, they may have the Weather Channel playing in the background, but they have no idea what the actual current conditions are outside your windshield. I repeat, you have to be the judge. And speaking of bad weather, sometimes you're your own worst enemy. Here's an excerpt from Trucking Life that illustrates this perfectly. One winter, Donner Pass, which is between Reno, Nevada and Sacramento, California, was shut down due to impassable roads. Yep, this is the same infamous Donner Pass you've heard horror stories about. The one where people decided that old Carl's butt looked a lot like a ribeye. Anyway, the following afternoon they opened the roads for travel, but only to vehicles with tire chains installed. Now, my company wasn't pressuring me, and I didn't much feel like flying in 2 feet of snow to chain up, so 2 days later, we were still sitting there. As I tend to do, I was eventually feeling the itch to get rolling. After all, I only get paid when the truck is moving. Against the evil overlord's advice, I finally broke down, installed the chains, and left Reno in my mirrors. About 10 hours later, we got to Sacramento. The thing is, it was only a 135-mile trip, but it took 10 hours. So was it worth chaining up? Probably not. You know, that particular night was one of the most miserable times we've ever spent in a truck. There's nothing quite like listening to, "I told you so, dumbass," for 10 hours. I hate it when she's right, largely because it happens so often. As this story illustrates, trucking is not a race. Best case scenario here, I wasted about 7 hours of driving time due to my impatience. Worst case, I could have wrecked and had my butt eaten like old Carl. Although now that I think about it, there's actually no chance of that happening. The evil overlord has shared a bathroom with me for over 20 years, and there's no way she'd go anywhere near my butt with a steak knife. However, a good possibility is that I could have easily slid into a ditch and racked up some points on my CSA score. The point is, just because you can run in bad weather doesn't mean you should. And always remember this. No load is worth your life. Okay, speaking of slowing down, let off the friggin' accelerator. Listen, depending on your school, you're probably spending anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks right now learning how to drive a truck so you can earn your commercial driver's license. So protect it already. Now, I don't know if you've discussed the CSA in class yet, so forgive me if this is rehash. The CSA, which stands for Compliance, Safety, Accountability, is a fairly new program where they're using points to rate both truck drivers and carriers. This way, a driver can use the carrier's CSA score to see how safe their fleet is, and the carriers use the score to decide who is a good driver for hiring purposes. So basically, both drivers and carriers get a score based on their safety record. So why would you risk losing your newly acquired license by speeding? Besides, tickets for traffic violations in trucks usually cost about twice as much as when you get one in your personal vehicle. Now, I say it again, you need to protect your CDL. Without it, you can't earn any money. And how can you buy Cheetos without money? Now I can hear some of you thinking, but I may have to speed to deliver my load on time. Well, you know, if that's the case, then I say your company is crappy at dispatching. The way I see it, a carrier's inability to plan loads properly has nothing to do with me. It's truly not my problem if they assign me a load that simply cannot be delivered legally. I'm not going to drive more hours than I have available because of their incompetence, nor am I going to go over the speed limit to deliver on time. Here's a great tactic to keep in mind. If a dispatcher ever tries to make you run illegal or belittles you because you aren't willing to run in bad weather, tell them to transfer you to the safety department. That'll end that conflict quicker than a squirrel all hopped up on Red Bull. Now, keeping with the subject of speeding, if you take nothing else out of this entire podcast, please listen closely to this next topic. This one little thing will save you lots of frustration, and it'll pretty much give everyone in the world one less reason to hate truck drivers. Sorry, had to make sure you're awake again. Don't be a turtle racer. Okay, if you don't understand that term, turtle racing is when two speed-limited trucks are trying to pass each other on the interstate. Now, in case your driving instructor hasn't mentioned this yet, many carriers have installed speed limiters on their trucks. Most of them set it somewhere between 63 and 65 miles an hour. Now, that can make it really hard to pass other trucks when you can only go slightly faster than the other driver. Now, since the vast majority of governed fleets are set at 65, me and my lightning-fast 64-mile-an-hour truck deal with this a lot. You can see that I'm always having slightly faster trucks trying to get around me. Now, back when I was a rookie, I was stubborn just like you are going to tend to be. My thought was always, hey, if you can't pass me faster than that, then that's your problem. This is precisely the wrong attitude to have. And it's something I still hear quite a bit on the CB when I'm trying to pass some donkey head who stubbornly refuses to let me around. I went into a lot of detail about turtle racing and how to avoid it in Trucker Dump 66, which I called Turtles Go Turtle Racing, but I'm going to try to sum it up quickly for you here. Everything I do in my life, I always try to run it through the golden rule. Now, in case you had horrible parents who never taught you this rule, it basically states that you should treat others as you would like them to treat you. Now, let's put this in the context of turtle racing. If you were an automobile driver, or even another trucker being held up by these two jerk faces blocking both lanes, how happy would you be? Wouldn't you wish they got out of your friggin' way so you could go about your business? Golden rule, folks. Now put yourself in the place of the slightly faster big rig trying to get around the slightly slower truck. It's taking you forever because the slower guy is being stubborn. Wouldn't that piss you off? Well, of course it would. And yes, I understand the word forever is a bit of an exaggeration. But trust me here, when you're out in the fast lane holding up traffic for 3 to 5 minutes, it feels like forever. Now here's my logic on this. Why should a faster truck have to go slower than he's capable of simply because some stubborn turd flanger won't let him pass quickly? I'm probably in this scenario at least 5 times a day. Trust me when I say that your load is not going to be late if you tap the brakes to let someone slightly faster get around you a bit quicker. Now, to be fair, your delivery probably wouldn't be late either if you ease off the throttle and stay behind the slower truck for the next 9 hours, but why should you have to do that? It literally takes 10 to 15 seconds to let the other driver pass, and then you're both back at full speed as they're slowly pulling away from you. Now, there are 2 things wrong with you being a stubborn bung munch. First, you've got a semi with an irritated trucker riding alongside you for a long time. And mark my words, the second he gets past you, he's going to nearly take your front bumper off by pulling back in front of you as soon as he can. Secondly, you're actively pissing off all the automobile drivers and the other truckers who you're holding up. Please don't be a turtle racing bonehead. Simply tap your brakes and let the other truck around. Sitting there being stubborn about winning the race only makes you madder about the situation. You feel it's the other guy's fault for blocking all the traffic, when in reality, you can put a stop to it by one little tap of your brakes. Get over it. Alright, now I'm going to finish up with some trucker etiquette that every new driver should start doing to make this industry a better place to work. Let's start with truck stop parking lot etiquette. This don't hold up traffic thing even extends into the truck stop parking lot. One of these situations involves something you newbies are probably scared spitless of right now. That's backing into a parking spot at a packed truck stop at night with other drivers watching. Don't worry, you will get better at backing. But for now, your goal is to minimize the reasons more experienced drivers have to complain about you. So for parking, when you're setting up for the backing job, look around you first. Is there another truck behind you that you could let around before you start? Simply stop in front of the spot so they can't steal it from you and turn on your 4-way flashers. They'll get the hint that you're letting them around, and they'll always be thankful for your thoughtfulness. It never ceases to amaze me how many times I see a driver whip out into 45-degree backing position when they've got 4 or 5 other trucks behind them who simply need to get out of the parking lot and back onto the road. You may be a rookie, but you don't have to be stupid. Next, always be courteous. Remember the golden rule. Here are 4 rules to live by when parking at a truck stop. 1. Don't let your pets piss or crap where other drivers have to walk. Number 2. You should follow this rule too. Now, if you don't believe me, email me at truckerdump@gmail.com and I'll be happy to send you some photos. Ugh. Third, keep your pets quiet. I once was awakened by a yapping dog. I tried to go back to sleep, but couldn't. I looked at the truck next to me where a dog was barking at pretty much nothing. I got dressed and grumpily knocked on their door. A woman answered and I asked if she could keep her dog quiet so I could sleep. She said 1 word to the dog and it shut up. No apology to me whatsoever. So basically, just remember that while you may be deaf to your best friend's barking at the wind, other drivers aren't. So put a muzzle on that mutt. And the 4th thing, keep in mind that truckers sleep at odd hours. Just because it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon doesn't mean you can back into a spot and crank up your Milli Vanilli. This has happened to me a few times, and each time I had to get dressed and go knock on their door. One of those times, a driver peeked out at me and refused to acknowledge me standing there. I stood there, steadily pounding on his door for a whole minute until he finally rolled down the window. He actually had the nerve to get pissed at me when I asked him to turn the music down. I have no shame in saying I called his company to report him. Yes, I'm a big fat tattletale. And an unrepentant one at that. Similar to loud music, don't carry on long, loud conversations outside your truck with another driver. You may be talking right beside someone's head while they're trying to sleep. Okay, let's move on to fuel island etiquette. Another situation where you need to be mindful of other drivers is at the fuel island. Now I know this is going to come as a shock, but fuel bays are meant for fueling. They are not meant as parking spots for people who want to go in and shower. They are not places to take your 30-minute mandatory breaks. And they are definitely not places to wash your entire truck with a tiny windshield squeegee. Trust me, I've seen all these things numerous times over the years. Time is money in this industry, especially with the advent of electronic logs. When you pull into a fuel bay, you need to do your fueling and then immediately pull up so the driver behind you can get started. After you pull up, there's about enough time to run inside to grab your Mountain Dew and Cheetos, but that's about it. Now, one of the most frequent things that happens is drivers pull up and park in front of the fuel bay like they're supposed to, but instead of making a quick trip in and out, they go order food at Wendy's or stand in line at the ever-present Subway. Next thing you know, you're standing in line being picky about how much mustard the sandwich artist is using, while the driver who is fueling behind you is forced to do one of 4 things. First option, they sit there and impatiently wait for you to return. Don't be surprised if you get a dirty look when you get back. You deserve it. Second option, they risk backing out of the fuel island, which is never a good thing. I'm sure your instructor has already taught you that you don't back up unless you absolutely have to. Backing is one of the leading causes of accidents, you know. Third option, the driver wants to back up, but another driver is queued up in line behind them, which now means you're pissing off 2 drivers. You are now officially a pinhead. And the fourth option, they decide to go into the truck stop and take care of their own business instead of waiting on you to move. Now they're keeping someone else from fueling. When they finally come back out, you're already gone, but the driver behind them is now pissed at them. Nice going, starting a chain reaction there, D-bag. Now it is possible to get your food and get back on the truck before the other driver's done fueling, but you need to use the golden rule here. Would you want to be held up? Nope. So if you're demanding fresh curly fries, go back out and move your friggin' truck, or at least make sure no one is pulled in behind you. Yes, I'm serious. I know it's inconvenient, but inconvenience yourself, not someone else, you selfish jerk. Golden rule, man. Live it. As for taking your 30-minute mandatory break on the fuel islands, the only time I consider that acceptable is if it's late at night and you can't find anywhere else to park. Even then, be mindful of the other drivers. Here's how to do this properly. First, pull through the fuel bay so you aren't keeping someone from fueling. Secondly, if someone pulls in to fuel behind you, wait until they're done and then pull around and go back through another open fuel bay and park in front of it, not in it. Thirdly, if your e-logs won't allow any movement whatsoever without ruining your 30-minute break, then it's quite simple.
Don't park in the friggin' fuel bay in the first place.
For more detailed information about all this, check out Trucker Dump 107, which I called the Fuel Bay Golden Rule. So there we have it. I hope these things will help you jumpstart your career with the right kind of attitude. I would like to leave you with a personal request, though. Don't tarnish the reputation of truckers. Trust me, it's bad enough as is. You can pretty much accomplish this by keeping the golden rule in mind. If you wouldn't want another driver keeping you awake, not letting you pass, blocking you at a fuel bay, stepping out of your truck into a puddle of icky urine or stinky cigarette butts, then don't do those things that will put another driver in that position. It really is that simple. If you want to be respected, respect others. Well, y'all have had enough of me for the day. Now get back out there and learn to drive that stinking truck. Grind some gears. Take 30 painstaking minutes to back into a wide open parking spot while only mowing down a couple of orange cones. Hey, they're cones! Whatever it works to give your instructor's heart palpitations. After all, every doctor says that raising your heart rate on a regular basis will increase your life. Well, hey, if that's the case, I guess your instructor will live forever. They should be thanking you, right? So hey, normally these podcasts are a lot longer than this, but I kept it short for your class. Typically I answer listener email, talk about stories I see in the news, tell you about a cool new product or app, or play special segments from other contributors. And whether you want to hear it or not, I often blather on about stuff going on in my personal life. Anywho, good luck with your trucking career. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me on Twitter where I'm at Todd McCann. That's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. You can also send your questions or join the Trucker Dump Slack group by emailing me at truckerdump@gmail.com. Well, thanks for listening. So until next time, drive safe and stay out of my way. Hey, where are you going? It's not over yet.
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Well, let's get back to some feedback, man. I am falling even further behind when I go long time between these episodes, but hey, I'm trying to get caught up. So first, let's hear from Anonymous. All right. Anonymous, like I said, this came from the header on the email says Bluegrass Sailor. So whoever that is, this is to you. He says, thanks, love the podcast. I drove for 15 years. I miss trucking. We had 4 kids, so I got off the road, and I still haul cattle and grain some, and farm full time. He says, I better go. Keep up the good job. Be safe. Keep on trucking. Well, I'm keeping on trucking for now, dude, whoever you are. And thanks for your 15 years of service. I'm glad you're getting a kick out of the podcast. All right, next up we have Fullofit. Yeah, that's a great name. I'm assuming it's a guy, but I could be wrong about that. I guess we'll see as we get down through the email here. And Fullofit is exactly that. Full of it. Lots of different topics here, so let's get started. They start, I downloaded a podcast player. Awesome, man. That is the first step. Any of you truckers out there, you know what? I'm not going to talk about podcasts who aren't listening to podcasts, because if you're listening to this, you are listening to podcasts. So never mind. I'm sorry I even went there. He goes on and says, I went about looking for something to listen to. That's how I stumbled upon your podcast. I've been binge listening to them and just finished episode 95. In fact, yours are the only podcasts I've listened to so far. I'm a truck driver, and I chose to be one. I've always wanted to since I was a kid, watching BJ and the Bear. Don't know if you remember that show or not. I might be showing my age. Well, if you're showing your age, then I am too, because I grew up on BJ and the Bear. I couldn't tell you anything about the show anymore, but I remember vividly the truck. I remember the chimp. I remember Greg Evigan. How in the heck I remember his name, I don't know, but that's how much it was instilled in me too. He goes on and says, yes, I run a CB. Yes, it is on most of the time. Wow. That is, well, that's just insane in my opinion. But he does come around and he says, I don't follow NASCAR. Well, good for you. Neither do I. He says, I have a hatred of most truck stops. I'm only there as little as possible. Well, I think that's the goal of every trucker, is just to get there and get out, because you ain't making any money if you're sitting at a truck stop, that's for sure. So I'm with you there, Fullofit. He goes on, I just wanted to write and let you know I have thoroughly enjoyed what I've listened to so far. As I am seeing that you're still making a podcast and blogging, I guess you're still trucking. Yes, for now I am, dude. He says, I was actually listening to your cast about Dallas as I was leaving there with my load. Ha, yeah. That's called Doing Dallas, wasn't it? Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes to that one. That one had some really weird stuff in it. Gay bars, if you want to know. If you missed that one, go check it out. Link in the show notes. He says, that was some weird timing. You know, I've experienced that too. Sometimes you'll be driving along and somebody's talking about, you know, some city they were just in or whatever, and you just happen to be in it. It's pretty cool. I think I did that on 99% Invisible podcast one time. They were talking about some obscure little town or whatever, telling some story from it, and I just happened to be in it, and it was like, it weirded you out. Anyway, he says, like I said, I've enjoyed what I've read so far. I agree with most of it. I do think you missed a point on the porn shops. Okay, that was the road to Smutville. I'll have to put a link in the show notes to that too. I don't know what episode that was off the top of my head. He says, if you agree with what they sell or not, they are giving trucks a free place to park. You know, I never really thought about that. You know, we can always, like he says, we can always use more places to park. And I've actually only done this once. And I remember I was down on I-71 in Kentucky, and there is a Pilot that is usually jam-packed, and there is a porno shop right across the way, and I had no choice. I was completely out of hours, and I went over there and found a parking space. And it's times like that when I'm glad that it's times like that the evil overlord, I'm glad she doesn't want to do the Find My Friends thing, because she probably would have wondered what I was doing sitting at a porn shop. I would have had a hard time explaining that one. Anyway, he goes on. I've also been paying close attention to what you have to say about e-logs. I know very little about them, and I am not looking forward to them at all. Well, nobody really is. He says, I'm still running loose leaf paper logs and will be as long as I can. Well, sounds like you got till December, dude, and then you're screwed. He says, I drive for an owner-operator lease to a medium-sized company out of the Detroit metro area. We mainly run auto parts. As I'm not a company driver, I don't do forced anything. I assume he's talking about forced dispatch. Yeah, you know, a lot of time forced dispatch, like I said in the article, is not exactly forced in a way. So I'll put a link to that article in the show notes also. Man, I got a lot of linking to do here. Thanks a lot, Fullofit. He says, I guess you would call what I do a regional driver. I mainly run in Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Texas. Yeah, I guess that's considered regional. I have no satellite in the truck, just a cell phone. I have no governor on the truck. Oh, man, that's uncool. I don't want a governor, but I got one. Always have. He says, that brings me to the cast you did on turtle racing. You really hit that one on the head. You know, that is one of my favorite ones, Fullofit. I think it's just a message that needs to be told to everybody, and that's why I included it in the podcast that is dedicated to new advice for truckers. Man, if they just learn that early right out of the gate, then we're going to have a lot less traffic problems out here. He continues, whenever I run up on one of these turtle racing situations, I'm always thinking the truck getting past and not slowing down to just get it done and over with is a beep. And he bleeped himself there. That was nice of him to leave the cuss word out of the email. Anyway, he says, another thing that irritates me about the turtle racers is all too often I'll be coming up on them fast in the left lane and they'll just jump right out in front of me. Yeah, I've seen that too. That's awful. It causes them to get on the brakes way hard. Yeah, I've seen that too. I've been that guy. He says, I'm not one to hang out in the left lane. I'm only out there to pass and then back to the right. Man, if everybody felt that way, it would be a much better place. This happens a lot. Yes, it does. And most times there's no one behind me. There's no reason they couldn't have waited for me to get on by. I used to think it was just they sucked at judging and at how fast I was closing in. But anymore, I believe that they just aren't happy with being governed. Well, you probably got a point to that, but I've never understood that either, why they just jump out like that. I mean, especially when you can see a big gap behind the blazing truck or even the car coming up on the left-hand lane. Just let them go by and then make your attack on the jerk in front of you right after they pass. He continues, I've been driving for 19 years. Well, that's close to me. I've been driving for 20. He says, I used to love it, but anymore it's just a job. Amen, brother. I'm so with you there. He says there's way too much of the me attitude out here anymore. And he has a few pet peeves he wants to share. Awesome. Love pet peeves. He says, I can't stand a driver that blocks fuel islands. Hey, I included that in the podcast for the new truckers. I can't stand drivers flashing their brights when I pass them. Either dim your lights or do nothing. I agree with that one. He says I have other ones, but those are the main two. He says, I apologize for my email just rambling on and the bad spelling. Well, dude, I didn't see any bad spelling. No, I didn't see anything misspelled, so good for you. He says, I'm not a writer, I just suck at it, always have. But I did great at all the other subjects in school. Go figure. You know, that's one of those things, some people are just like good at math, and some people just aren't. The evil overlord is taking a chemistry class right now, and math is not her strong suit, so she's not really loving it. I had to help her with some the other night, and I suck at math too, but we figured it out together, so that's good. Okay, where did we leave off here? He says, speaking of the evil overlord, he says, I need to also throw this in here. From what I've heard about the evil overlord, you're a very lucky man. And from what I know about you, she did all right also. Well, I'm a pretty lucky guy. I'm not sure about her. We'll have to, I'll let you be the judge of that. He closes by saying, I'm just going to close by saying I've really enjoyed your podcast and looking forward to hearing the rest of them. Well, I hope I can keep putting them out, and I hope you just keep enjoying them. Oh, he calls himself Steve after all that. I could have been addressing you as Steve. Quite frankly, though, I like Fullofit better. Oh, this is funny. At the bottom of the email, he also says, I sometimes go by Dilgaf, Dilligaf. I guess that's Dilligaf. He says it stands for, do I look like I give a... Oh, man. Both creative names. Very good there. All right. Thanks for writing in, Steve. I appreciate it. Hope you write in the future when you catch up on more podcasts and just write in a massive blob of it like you did here. That was great. All right, let's continue on, and let's hear from Renae, who is a part of the Trucker Dump Slack group, which you all should be, and join her in there. All right, here's what she has to say. All right, she says, I'd love to do an audio feedback one of these days, but I don't have the equipment. Not to mention, I'm really self-conscious because I used to sing, and I'm losing my voice as I get older. Hey, Renae, that's no excuse. I'm older. I used to sing. I'm losing my voice, and if you've ever heard me on my karaoke channel that I do over there on Sing Snap, well, you'll know. I try my best, and I have a lot of fun doing it. If anybody's interested, just go to the abouttruckdriving.com in the About page. I think there's a link to my Sing Snap stuff over there. Boy, that's hard to say. Sing Snap. Say that 5 times fast. All right, she says, front seat sitters during downtime. Okay, this is about the podcast I called the driver's seat phenomenon, where I just couldn't figure out why guys sit up in the front seat all the time. I'll put a link in that in the show notes also. She says, I sit in the front seat for several reasons. 1, all my entertainment is up front. All my electronics. She says, I'm sorry, I'm an Android and Windows user. I never thought about trying Apple products until I'd already loaded up on the other guys. Well, that's understandable. She says, and everything's plugged into the stereo up there. The only controls on the stereo are up front. Okay, hadn't thought of that. Let's go on to number 2. She says, in order to use the table, I have to deconstruct my bed and reconstruct it when I want to go back to bed. Unless I'm on a 34, it's useless. And she says, yep, this is the genius of Volvo. Well, I've seen those Volvos. I think they're kind of cool. You know, how you can just make the bottom into a little dining room area, basically. And if you have an upper bunk, you can just sleep up there if you want. But I've never actually been in one, so I'll take your word for it that it's kind of screwy. Anyway, you know, I don't have any table or anything in my bunk. I just sit on my bed. That's all I do. I just sit on the bed, lean up against the back wall. Got some pillows behind me, and that's where I sit most of the time. She says, number 3, my legs fall asleep sitting in the bunk. I have 3 herniated discs in my lower back. Ooh, bummer. She says it also doesn't allow me to keep my legs up. The bed is for sleeping and tossing my stuff out of the way. Well, my legs are up on the bed, so, well, each to their own. Number 4, it's easier to get up and move around from a chair than a bunk. I've got short legs and arms. Midget. She says I have to scoot, bend, and reach way too far. She says it's easier to get the dog out for his doggy duties from the driver's seat, which is conveniently located right next to the leash's home in the door pocket. Okay, well, I don't have a dog either, so that makes sense. Number 5, food is easier to eat from the driver's seat without getting crumbs in the bed. Note the disappointment in the table location. Okay, well, you've got that going on, man. When I had the nephews in here, anytime they were eating on the bed, it was like there was just freaking crumbs everywhere. I do a pretty decent job setting my big Atlas underneath me, and I just use that as a TV tray, and I don't get a lot of crumbs on the bed. Maybe I'm just super neat like that. And number 6, she says, last, but only because I can't think of any more at the moment, I like to watch people. Standing and walking around cause me real pain after very long. Sitting, obviously from my job, doesn't seem to cause too many problems for me. Well, you know, Renae, this is one of those things it sounds like to me. I remember driver Chris Mack writing in and saying the same thing. He just liked to watch people, you know. I guess you see people up there all the time just watching people back in, watching people walking their dogs, walking across the parking lot. I don't know what they're looking at and what's so impressive, but hey, to each their own. All right, she says there's a lot of material that you've given us on the blog and podcast to digest and ponder, but I think this will be a start. Yeah, from your other 2 emails that I see at least looking at right now, it is just a start, which is great. I love it. Love getting feedback. All right, she says, I'm also working on my own blog. Hey, cool. But it's completely boring at the moment, she says. She said that, not me. She says it's all about how I started in trucking and who I am. I'm not naturally funny, and research takes forever. Well, I'm guessing if you ask the evil overlord, she would say I'm not naturally funny either. But then again, when you live with somebody for 24 years of marriage and, I don't know, 3 years before that we were dating, nothing I say is funny anymore. Anyway, she says, I will be doing research and gathering data as I go on, but for now it's just my story. Unfortunately, it's pretty dry and boring, even in my opinion. If you want to check it out, it's truckdrivingwoman.blogspot.com. And I did check it out. I thought the writing was pretty good. I don't think it was super boring. Like you said, it's just about you right now, which is fine. That's kind of how I started the Trucker Dump, just venting about stuff that I wanted to vent about. Actually, it wasn't called the Trucker Dump back then, though. It was called the About Trucking Jobs blog. How horrible is that? Awful. Anyway, she says, I really do enjoy your podcast, and I want to ask you a question. If you're really trying to get out of trucking, why are you doing all this for truckers? You know, that's a darn good question. You know, though, Renae, I'll tell you, ever since I ran across podcasts in the first place, I started listening to podcasts because I was considering getting a Mac, and I didn't know anything about them. And so I got a couple of tech podcasts and started listening to him about Macintosh. And I just fell in love with podcasting in general. Okay, so let's put that on hold for a second. When I first got into trucking, I couldn't find any good information about it. So I knew I wanted to write a book. So I actually started writing my book, Trucking Life, back in 2005. But then as I was writing the book, I thought, who's going to buy this thing? I need to get a following. And I knew enough about blogging back then, just from reading stuff, that I knew I needed to get started ASAP, because I knew it would take me a while to write the book. So in 2009, I actually started, like I said, it had been 4 years since I had started the book, and I still wasn't done, but I decided I better get the blog started. And so I started what was called the About Truck Driving Jobs blog, I think is what it was called. Yeah. Did I already say that? I must have. I don't know. I had to cut and do an edit in there, so I may have already said that. Oops. Yeah, but I just decided to start helping people and just putting my name out there and putting the content that I was learning over time, and just things that I was concerned about with the industry. Like one of my first blog posts was called, Whatever Happened to Common Courtesy, and it's about this, just how no truckers ever want to help each other anymore, that kind of a thing. So now, of course, I'm doing all this to help promote my books and get some book sales and stuff. And I have some future plans with some other ventures, and this is all just working towards it. But honestly, I just love helping drivers too, especially new ones. I think it's great that I have experienced truckers that follow the podcast. That's great. I love it. But it's the new people who write me and ask me questions about getting into the industry that I really love. I really love to be able to help them make some good choices early on and not screw up. I had an opportunity just a couple of weeks ago where I met this driver, and he asked to use my phone, and I was like, well, how do you not have a phone out here? And he said, well, I'm not getting any miles at my company. And he said he couldn't pay his phone bill, so it got turned off. He had a phone, it was just turned off. And so he had to make some phone calls. Well, after it took him 25 minutes to get a comm check approved, I was like, you got to be freaking kidding me, dude. I found out who he worked for, and I said, what's going on with you? And I found out his story, and he had a rough month. He went to work for a company who put him together with a team driver right in the beginning, didn't give him very good training, put him with a team driver, and while he was respectful to this team driver, his team driver would not turn down the radio while he was trying to sleep. I mean, not even turn it down a little bit. He just cranked it as loud as he wanted and didn't care. So this guy's trying to, he's trying to get sleep so he can drive the next day, and he's not able to do that. So he had to quit that job within like 2 months, which I don't blame him. And then he'd been with this other one for 4 months, and it went good about the first month, like a lot of jobs do when they're trying to impress you with the miles. And then it just turned to hell in a handbasket, and he hadn't been getting any miles. And he says it sometimes takes him, his dispatcher, like a day or two to respond to some of his messages or his phone calls. And I'm just like, dude, that is not cool. How much are you making to deal with all this? And he said 25 cents per mile. Wow. I just had to tell him that when I started in 1997, I was making 33 cents a mile. So there is no reason he needs to be making 25 cents a mile. And it was nice to kind of get him on the right track. I don't normally do a lot of recruiting for my own company, but I actually, in this case, handed him one of our little recruitment cards and said, here, call this number. I don't know if they can hire you yet with only 7 months of experience, but you got to get out of that situation, and you have to, call some different places. And he said, well, I only got 7 months of experience. I have had 2 jobs. People are going to think I'm a job hopper. And I said, well, dude, you just got to explain your situation, and you have to do something about that, because you got to get out of this situation. And he was very grateful that I actually ran into him later on that day at the truck stop again, where he needed a phone again, and I let him use it again. So I probably spent like an hour and a half with him total. while he was calling around and getting some stuff taken care of. And he was just so grateful, and it made me feel so good about being able to help him and hopefully get him on the right path, and, you know, just try to tell him that just because he's a new driver, he didn't have to take that crap, you know, that he was worth more than that. And I think by the end of it, he was convinced that he was worth more than that. And if I can just get something like that happen every once in a while, it really makes it worthwhile for me to do all this. Okay. Wow, that was long-winded. Anyway, thanks for the email, Renae. Thanks for joining the Trucker Dump Slack group. Anybody else want to join that? truckerdump@gmail.com. Ask for an invite. You can join us over there. Wow. I'm looking at this and I am going really long. This is going to be one long podcast. Oh, well, that's all right. You guys always say you like the long ones. So I guess we'll just crank up the music and get on with it. Next time, well, let's hope it's not another 3 months. All right. Y'all take it easy. So, what'd you think of my podcast within a podcast? How'd I do on advice to new truckers? What'd I miss? Go to abouttruckdriving.com and search for TD123 to leave a comment, or snap me an email at truckerdump@gmail.com. You can also join the Trucker Dump Slack group with that email. I'm also still on Twitter at Todd McCann. That's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. And hey, if you haven't checked out my books yet, head over to abouttruckdriving.com and have a look at my landing page that I finally got fixed. And of course, iTunes reviews are always welcome, as are Amazon reviews for the books. Well, as always, thanks for listening and staying subscribed. So until next time, drive safe and stay out of my way.